And Clay, this clicker is not working again. Yeah, it's on. Oh, there we go. Now it is. Now it's working. Was that you or me? Okay, mine's working now. I think we're good. Okay, open your Bibles to the book of Nehemiah. As promised, Scott did the study on the book of Esther first week after the book of Ezra, and that's because the book of Nehemiah actually comes after the events that took place in the book of Esther. I'm going to show you a timeline here. I've showed you several timelines. This is a different one, kind of give you an idea of what's going on. One of the key dates is right here, and really started in 586 BC, but Jerusalem was destroyed in 606 BC, and as Jeremiah prophesied, they were in exile. They went into the land of Babylon. They didn't take every single person, but they took the best and the brightest of them. You might remember Daniel and his three friends, and their names were? Not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those were not their names. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Yeah, it's not a trick question. Go read the book. I remember I said that in a Bible class one time a long time ago, and people told me I was wrong. I said, well, go read the book. Those Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that's what they were renamed, to take the name of God out of them. Those are reflections of the Babylonian false gods. Anyway, one of my pet peeves. But after 70 years of captivity, God worked through a pagan king. His name was the king of Persia. His name was Cyrus. And God put it in Cyrus's heart, even though he was a pagan king, to let the Israelites go back to Jerusalem and begin to rebuild. So, under the leadership of different people, especially Ezra, they go back in 536. It took them 20 years to rebuild the temple. That was because they started and they stopped. They got discouraged and so forth. God sent prophets to encourage them to rebuild. Anyway, after 20 years, they rebuilt it. And then Ezra leaves Babylon to lead more people back to Jerusalem. And right in this period right here is where right in this period, right in here and in here, before we get to Nehemiah, is where the events of Esther take place. Here's another timeline, just to kind of show you. 70 years of captivity, Zerubbabel returns. His job was he rebuilt the temple. And then Ezra was a great scribe. He was a great scholar. What he did was he taught people the law of God. The temple was built by Zerubbabel, but he taught people the law of God and instilled God's word into them, which they had forgotten. And then, as we're going to start studying tonight, about the year 445 BC, Nehemiah returns, and his job is to rebuild the wall around the city, because the wall was really important. Now, something that's interesting that you might not have thought about before. The Persian king, as we read about here in the book of Nehemiah, his name is Artaxerxes. He was the son of Xerxes. Who was Xerxes' wife? First it was Vashti, and then she backtalked him and wouldn't come, and he deposed her, and his wife was Queen Esther, was his wife. And so, this Xerxes right here is the stepson of, this Artaxerxes here is the stepson of Queen Esther. And it's very possible, a lot of scholars think, that Esther may have very well still been alive and still in the palace in Susa, as we'll see, while the events are taking place in the book of Nehemiah. And that might help explain some things that take place later in the book of Nehemiah, why the king is all of a sudden, usually he's not very prone to let anybody persuade him, but when Nehemiah comes and asks him if he can leave and go back to rebuild, he's all of a sudden listens. Maybe it's because Esther is there. That's one of the reasons. That certainly is not the only reason. So I'm going to leave this map up here. As we read, you're going to see the journey that Nehemiah is going to take. He's over here in Susa. Susa is the capital of, this is where the king resides, in the citadel at Susa. This is the capital of the Persian Empire. The way they would go, they wouldn't go straight across the desert because there's no water source in there and they would die. So they would always go up to the north along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and they would come down. That's why you read in the Old Testament, almost always it says people are attacking from the north. Even though the people may have lived to the east, they're always attacking from the north because that's the way they came down. Okay, so let's read in the Bible while I leave this map up here. We're going to read Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 1 through 11. Now, what I want you to be looking for is, what are lessons, because this is recorded not to give us a history lesson. I've given you brief background, brief history, but this is not going to be a history lesson. God wants us to learn something about life from this and how it applies to your life and how it applies to my life. So as we read this, I want you to be looking for what principles do you see that still apply to you today. So let's begin reading chapter 1, verse 1 through 11. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, that's the 20th year of the reign of the king Artaxerxes, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, who was one of my brothers, he came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. And they said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. And when I heard these things, I sat down and wept. And for some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And then I said, and all the way from verse 5 down through verse 11 is a long prayer. And here's what he says in his prayer. Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to the prayer that your servants praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins that we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We've acted very wickedly towards you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws that you gave your servant Moses. Remember the instruction that you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you're unfaithful, I'll scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I'll gather them from there and bring them to this place that I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand, Lord. Let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant, he's talking about himself, give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. I was cupbearer to the king. Okay. What do you see in there? That's application for you. Pardon me? He's concerned about the situation that's going on. He's 800 miles away. 800 miles is not a big deal to you and I. We could be on a plane and be somewhere, 2 hours, 800 miles away. But for them, 800 miles away, that's a long trip. And even though he's not there and hasn't been to Jerusalem, he's in Persia. He's very concerned about what's going on there. And what is going on in Judah, in Israel, in Jerusalem? What's going on there? Yeah, he says right here, it's a bad situation. He said, the people there, this is in verse 3, they're in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down. Its gates have been burned with fire. A wall, what was a wall in the first century? Why was a wall important? Protection from your enemies. And these walls were not like a 6-foot fence you might have around your backyard. We're talking huge, giant walls to protect against invading enemies. And when the walls were down, there's no protection. People lived in constant fear and anxiety all the time. So it is a big, big problem. So what does Nehemiah do when he hears about this problem? First of all, let me ask this question. Who is Nehemiah? What's his job? He's a cupbearer. What's a cupbearer? He's a cupbearer. He works in the palace. He works for the Persian king. He's in the king's cabinet, you might say. He's the cupbearer. What does a cupbearer do? Anybody know? Yes. This was a really important job. Very hard to get life insurance with this job, though. Because your job was, before somebody gave the wine to the king, your job was to taste test it and make sure nobody had slipped something in there that would kill him. Probably not the most popular job in the world, but Nehemiah is a trusted advisor, a very loyal advisor, an important job. He stands between death and the king. So he's preserving him and keeping him alive. So that's his job. He's an important official, probably made good money for back in the day. But when he hears about what is going on in Judah and in Jerusalem, about the trouble the people in, the walls are broken down, the disgrace the people are in, what does he do? He prays. He weeps. He fasts. He has this real long prayer here. And it says, in the month of Kislev, that'll be important here in a second, but in the month of Kislev, that's equivalent to our December of 446 BC, is when he hears this. And he starts praying. It says in verse 4 that he prays for some days. We're going to find out exactly how long that is here in just a second. So here's an important guy. And it says he's praying to the king. And what does he want? What's he wanting from the king, you think? Does he want anything from the king? Exactly. He wants permission to leave his job, a very important job, stands between death and the king, to go make this 800-mile trip, which he would have been gone for months. It would have taken months just to get there. And he's going to be gone for a long time. How inclined do you think a ungodly, pagan Persian king is going to be to granting his request? How many of you think that these kings were known for their understanding and their compassion? They are not known for being understanding and compassionate. In fact, usually people are very afraid to bring up anything that could cause the king to have a bad day, and especially a royal advisor. Usually the king would say something like, "Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? No, you can't leave. This is your job. You're going to stay here. You're going to be gone for months and months and months. There's no way that you're going to do that." And I love what he says at the end of this prayer in verse 11. He says, "Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant," he's talking about himself, "and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man." He's praying to God and he's saying, "God, please give me success. I'm going to go in to this man who is usually doesn't have a very kind disposition. I'm going to ask him for a long leave of absence. And he's usually not very favorably disposed towards people who ask things like that. So God, I'm begging you, I'm asking you to change his heart." Now, I want to show you something. This is a Jewish calendar. It says that he learned about the situation and the plight of his fellow Israelites in Jerusalem. This is chapter 1, verse 1. He learned of it in the month of Kislev. Here's Kislev down here. That's equivalent to our December. Think Christmas time, okay, just to get it in your mind. He learns of it, the equivalent of our Christmas time. And if you look in chapter 2, verse 1, it says, in the month of Nisan. Nisan, where's Nisan at? There it is right there. Nisan is the equivalent to our March or April. Think Easter. He has been praying. Remember I said a minute ago he prays this prayer. It says for some days. Some days is 4 months. He's been praying from the equivalent of Christmas to Easter. He's been confessing the sins of him and his people. First of all, he does that. He doesn't say, "Hey, why has this happened to us?" He knows why it's happened. We've been disobedient. We haven't obeyed your law. And he bombards the throne of God for 4 months. And for 4 months, before doing anything, quote, doing anything, before doing anything, taking his own action, he's asking God to take action. Now, here's a lesson that I see from this. Any great work of God begins by God doing a great work in us. If you have aspirations of doing something great for God, that's wonderful, but it has to first start with a great work in us. And you see him, you see his humility, you see his confession, you see his repentance, and you see that he's not willing to just say, okay, God, I'm going to start doing something. No, he's asking for guidance. He's asking for direction. He's asking for insight. And I'm sure, as we're going to see here in just a little bit, while he's praying, he's also gathering information about the situation that's going on back in Jerusalem, so that when or if or when God opens a door for him to be able to do what God has put on his heart, he'll be able to do it. Now, you've probably seen this next phrase before. I came up with this phrase a long time ago. I think it's particularly good. Here's what all of us should do when a situation comes upon us that has caused distress. Y'all ever had a situation that's caused you distress? Maybe recently. A situation comes, it's caused you distress. Usually my reaction is, and maybe yours is the same sometimes, I want to do something, right? Here's what we should do. Don't just do something, sit there. We usually say the opposite. Don't just sit there, do something. That's not what this says. This says, don't just do something, sit there. Sit there for 4 months and pray. Before he, quote, does anything, he sits there for 4 months from Christmas to Easter, the equivalent in our calendar, right? For 4 months, and he bombards the throne of God in prayer. If you want to get things accomplished, things that you are concerned about, things that are causing you distress, this is the most effective thing that we can do. We're not really wired to think that way, though, are we? We're wired to think, I have to go do something. Let me ask you a question. We all know the answer to this, but we're just not that good at implementing it, or at least I'm not. Who can get more work done? You or God? That's pretty much a no-brainer. God created the entire universe out of nothing in 6 days, and the Bible says it wasn't hard for him at all. And he can get way more done than we can. A lot of times we've heard this phrase, well, if everything else fails, pray. That's really backwards. It should be the first thing we do is pray. Yes, Lejan? Yeah, we're going to get to that here in just a second. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're getting ahead of me, Lejan, but you're right. You're going into chapter 2, but you're right. But I think this lesson for all of us is important. When distressing things come upon us and something is really bothering us, what do we need to do? 4 months. Not saying that that's set in stone, but we need to spend a lengthy time in prayer, not just a little quick prayer. No, let's really spend time praying to God. Okay. Let's go down to chapter 2. We're going to read chapter 2. We're going to read verse 1 through 10. And once again, I want you to be looking for and thinking about, Lujan just mentioned one of them. It was a good thought, but you got a little hit, but she was right on task. As we look at 2, 1 through 10, tell me what you see God speaking to you for your life. He says, in the month of Nisan, that's equivalent to our April, as I just showed, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and I gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. And so the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. I was very much afraid. But I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? And the king said to me, what is it you want? Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servants found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried so I can rebuild it. Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, who is Esther, asked me, how long will your journey take? And when will you get back? It pleased the king to send to me, so I set a time. I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, that's the area between where he is in Persia and where he's going in Jerusalem, so that they'll provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, who's the keeper of the royal park, so he'll give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple and for the city wall and for the residence that I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my requests. And so I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, and I gave them the king's letters. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. And when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. Okay, Lujan, what were you going to say? You were making a really good comment a second ago. It fits here perfect now because I just read it. Yeah. Yeah, do you think the king normally, powerful, this is the equivalent of the president of the United States, the most powerful country in the world at the time. And some little, person who tastes the wine, do you think he really cares all that much what's going on in his life? These are not godly people, these kings. And normally, he wouldn't notice at all what's going on with Nehemiah. But Nehemiah is sad on this occasion. Why is he sad? Broken heart over what? Yeah, over what's the situation with his people, the Israelites back in Jerusalem. And when your heart is broken a lot of times, it shows in your disposition, it shows in your face, it shows in your body language. And so the king asked him, the king says, he said, I hadn't been sat in his presence before, and the king said, what's the problem? And then it says in verse 2, Nehemiah said, I was very much afraid. Why was he afraid? And he knew that these kings are not very understanding, and that they saw that you're having a bad day. The king doesn't care anything about your problems normally. And normally you would have a worse problem if this happened, meaning you'd probably get your head cut off, right? But notice what it says. Nehemiah speaks his heart here. He says, why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? He just blurts out. He says, here's what's going on with me. Here's why I'm sad. Now, this brings up a really good question for us. This is a pagan king. He has an audience. Nehemiah is having an audience with a pagan king. And instead, when the king says, what's the problem? He doesn't say, oh, everything's fine, just fine. That's our phrase, right? Often when we come to church, how you doing? I'm fine, just fine. How many of you think that all 300 of us who are members of this church, every Sunday and every Wednesday, are fine, just fine? That's what we say. Is it possible that maybe we need to work on the environment that we've created here a little bit? Meaning that we should create an environment where people should be willing, like he does to a pagan king, not the best environment in the world, but he bears his heart. This is a family, right? Church is a family. Church ought to be a place where we're not afraid to say what we really think, what's going on in our heart, what's troubling us, and what's bothering us. We're not afraid because we know we have brothers and sisters who understand and will help us. Yes, Jakey? We don't know. Right. Yes. And how was God at work? Keep in mind, what had Nehemiah been doing right before this? for 4 months praying. I don't think it's an accident. In fact, the way the text is constructed, he's trying to say it in blurring letters. This is no accident that all of a sudden the king, who is normally very unreasonable and not a nice person, is now very sympathetic to his cause. What caused that? 4 months of prayer. Now, what this ought to say to all of us is, you might have a person or persons in your life somewhere. Might be, I hope it's not a husband or wife, but that does happen. Hope it's not a son or a daughter or a mother or father, but that does happen. A coworker, a boss, one of your employees if you are the boss, a neighbor, et cetera, fill in the blank, who is a very unreasonable person and very difficult to talk to. Y'all ever had a situation like that? I bet all of us probably have. I want to show you a powerful verse. Turn to the book of Proverbs. We're going to read one verse. Whoever gets to Proverbs chapter 21, verse 1 first, if you would read that. Proverbs, and read it loud and clear so everybody can hear. Whoever gets there, whoever has that. Pardon me? The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord, and he, talking about God, turns it wherever he wills. Here's what that means. That person who is very unreasonable in your life, and you think they'll never change. In fact, we often say, well, that's just the way they are, they'll never change. That's not true. Have you changed? Boy, I have. You guys would not have recognized me. Despite the hair, I had a lot of hair when I was 17. When I was 17, I never read the Bible, didn't know any of it, didn't go to church. Hardly ever. Didn't have the habit. I didn't even know they had church on Wednesday night. Really? Have church on Wednesday night? People do change. And people change, especially when we bombard the throne of God with prayer. And that's what is going on here in the situation with Nehemiah. And so, he was afraid, but he blurts out what is going on. We should be able to talk to one another about what's going on. And then, verse 4, the king said to me, what is it you want? Like, I bet this shocked Nehemiah. He's never said that to him before. Really? You're asking me what I want? Normally, he doesn't care what he wants. And then I prayed to the God of heaven, verse 4. Now, he's been praying for 4 months. What this is an emergency 911 real quick prayer. You know what I'm talking about? You might have been praying for a long time about something. Maybe just for example, let's say it's a job interview. You've been praying, God, open up a door for whatever job it is, and you finally get an interview with some company or whatever it is. And great, you're thanking God for all this. You're in there, you're in the waiting room, about ready to go into interview, and they say, yes, Mr. So-and-so, come on in. And right when you're going in, as you're walking in there, you're saying a 911 quick emergency prayer, right? And it happens in a lot of situations. God does not only listen to 4-month prayers, he also listens to 4-second prayers. Both are necessary and needed. And that's what I see going on right here. What else do y'all see in these verses that's applicable? How was he, you're right, you're exactly right, Abby. How was he able to be so specific? Yeah. When he was praying, I bet you when he was praying for that 4 months, not only was he praying, he was planning. We can't just say, and I think this is an important point, we can't just expect God to do everything and us do nothing, right? There needs to be both. There needs to be both going on. While we're praying, we're asking God, we're bombarding the throne of God to change things. All the while, we're doing our homework. Yeah, that's a good point. Pray to win the lottery, need to buy a ticket. Or we often pray, a lot of you have prayed, you've heard this many times before the preacher gets up to preach, Lord, help him to have a ready recollection, right? That's a good prayer. But you know what I have found a lot that helps to have a ready recollection? If you study during the week. That's what I have found. Like when I was in high school and college, I found this. There was a direct correlation between how much you studied and how you did on the test. Right? It's not enough just to go in, Lord, having not studied any, Lord, help me ace this test. If you didn't study any, it's probably not going to work. So he had done his homework. What else do y'all see here? Yeah, remember I mentioned Esther's probably still on a lot of scholars think she's still there. She might have been influencing him. Remember when back in the book of Esther, chapter 4, verse 14, when Esther's, was it her uncle, Mordecai, said, who knows whether you have come to such a place for a time like this, right? God has brought you, who knows, maybe God brought you right here, right now for this purpose. And maybe she's still there, and God is working through her also to get this king's attention. It's an interesting thing to think about. So this king is he's very willing to do whatever Nehemiah wants. In fact, he does more than what he wants. He asks him down in verse 6, how long is your journey going to take, and when are you going to get back? And it says it pleased the king to send him. He knows the specific answers to these, to go back to what Abby was saying, because I think he's been thinking about this, not only praying, but planning at the same time for these 4 months. And then, down in verse 8, it says, because the gracious hand of God was on me, the king granted my request. This king is willing to let him do everything. And he says specifically why it is, because the gracious hand of God was involved in all this. And that was because Nehemiah was going along with the purposes of God. He's praying to God. He confessed his sins and the sins of his people. He'd been very humble. He'd been praying and bombarding the throne of God. And as a result of that, God put his hand of blessing on him. And then I want you to notice something else in verse 9. So I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates. And then if you look down in verse 11, it says eventually says, I went to Jerusalem. It's one thing to pray about something and plan about something. It's another thing to actually do it. He prays about it. He's planning about it. But when it gets down to it, he actually goes. He actually does it. I think this is an important point. God is at work to change others' hearts, and that work begins with the change in our hearts. God is at work to change others' hearts. We need to remember that. When you're up against a seemingly impossible situation with a person who is not very understanding or sympathetic at all, or a group of people who are not very sympathetic or understanding at all, and we use this phrase of them, he'll never change, she'll never change, they'll never change. Remember this. This king changes. 4 months of prayer, bombarding the throne of God, I think is what's going to do that. Okay, if I could get somebody to read, I'm going to look for some more life lessons in this last section, chapter 2, verse 11 through the end of the chapter, down to verse 20. Who will read 2, verse 11 through 20? Everybody's volunteering at the same time. It's hard to find a volunteer. 2:11 through 20. 2:11 through 20. Going once, going twice. Jason Blackman. Well, some of those names, Jason, you see why I wanted you to read that passage to me? All right, thank you for doing that. Okay, what do y'all see here that applies to you? Applicable principles, life lessons. Exactly. He didn't tell anybody. Yeah. It says 3 times. I noticed that too. 3 times it mentions the word night. Why does he go out at night? 3 times it says that. Why doesn't he want anybody to know what he's doing? People don't always understand the plans you're formulating. People don't always understand what God has laid on your heart. I've discovered that. They don't always get it. So sometimes you just have to go it alone on your own and gather the data. When you're ready to start the work, whatever that job is that you feel like God has called you to do, you need to have adequate information. You need to be prepared. I love this right here. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. Who are these guys? Who? They're enemies. These are not Israelites. These are people, I don't know exactly what a Horonite is, but we've heard of the Ammonites before. These are enemies of the people of God. They're opposed to God. They don't want the city of Jerusalem to be rebuilt. They don't want the walls to be rebuilt. They're anti-God, and so they oppose. They've heard what's going to go on, and so behind the scenes they're going to kind of start a murmuring kind of campaign. Let me just tell everybody something. This is true. Anytime God puts something on your heart that's worthwhile, and you go to God and pray about it, and you put the plans together and all that, and you're trying to do something that hasn't been done before, been done in that way before, you'll be opposed. I promise you that's true. I've seen this time and time and time again, and so have you, in whatever area you're talking about. You try to do something for God, you will be opposed. Now, when that happens, what does that usually do to us? It discourages us, which is understandable. I mean, we're all human beings. But if you really have done your homework and you've seen evidence, which Nehemiah already has, that God is behind this, because look at what God's done. Opens the king's heart, get him to move, give him the resources that he needed. We need to pray for God to help us get over our discouragement and to move forward, even though there's going to be opposition. As Jakey said, he goes out at night, mentions that 3 times. He goes out at night. He has just a few other people, support staff with him, but he doesn't want anybody else to see what he's doing. At nighttime, when there's not a bunch of people milling around, when there's not enemies coming up and saying, hey, what are you doing? And laughing at him and mocking him and ridiculing, he's all by himself. It's quiet. And he's getting the information. He's inspecting things. He's checking out this gate. He's checking out that gate. What does that need? What does this need? How many people are going to need to do this? How long is that going to take? What do we need over here? He's gathering all his information. And that's what all of us need to do whenever we're thinking about some kind of a proposal or some type of a proposal for a project. We need to gather the data. We need to gather the information first. And sometimes nobody else needs to know about it. It's just between you and God. I love this verse. I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. Tell me what you see in that verse right there. Because what, Scott? Yes. What else do y'all see here? They did follow him. He had a good reputation. They knew that he had done his homework. Tell me what else you see here. I see a key phrase in here. Doing the will of God. Notice it says, I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. Do you believe that God puts things on your heart? Do you think it only happened then and it doesn't happen now? Has God ever burdened you? That's Old Testament language that was used in the prophets, the prophetic writings all the time. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. All of them. It's called a burden, something God puts on their heart. Something that God says, you should do this. This is what is needed. He puts a burden on them. I think God still does that. In fact, I bet there's some people in here right now who probably have something God's put on your heart. You need to do this. As I said before, if you try to do something for God and haven't been done that way before, you're going to be opposed. But don't let opposition discourage you. Jesus was opposed. Paul was opposed. Remember, he got almost stoned to death in every town he ever went in. And then he would just dust himself off and go right back to the same town. That guy was tough because he knew God was behind it. And if we know God is behind it and God is in it, it'll give us the courage to keep on going on. Let me just say this last thing. The doing is first empowered by God doing in us. I mentioned that Nehemiah, after all this prayer and all this time, he finally goes. It says twice that he went. He went to the kings of the Trans-Euphrates, and then he made this 800-mile journey to Jerusalem. He finally went. But the doing was first empowered. Before the doing was God doing something in him. And that's the way it is with us too. If we're going to be successful at what it is we're thinking about doing or what we think God has put on our heart, we need to make sure that we spend time with God to let him do the work in us that needs to be done. And as we see here in this story of Nehemiah, it started with his humility. Remember when he was confessing the sins of the people? Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, God, those people, they were so... He said, I also, we have done wrong. He confessed sin, asked for God's forgiveness, asked for God to be at work. And when you approach it that way, when you confess and you have that kind of humility before God and you're relying upon God, God will bless you. And even if people oppose you, if you know God is with you, it makes all the difference in the world. All right, I appreciate everybody being here tonight. I hope everybody has a blessed rest of this evening, a blessed rest of the week, and Lord willing, we will see everybody Sunday morning. Everybody have a good evening.